You've asked for it, and yet again, your boy is here to deliver. This is a complete dribbling tutorial for EAFC 24. And just a quick preamble, every technique I teach will then resonate with another technique that I teach you throughout this tutorial. So it is important that you watch through the whole tutorial to learn each and every technique so that you understand what I'm referring to in each segment. I'm going to summarize dribbling in a T for you guys. In FIFA 21, the dribbling technique that was more profound and allowed you to maneuver the ball a lot better when you're dribbling was chopping the left stick. This would give you a lot more movement and agility on the ball. Come FIFA 22, the actual technique to dribble and have more movement was rolling the left stick. So essentially there was a difference between the 2 years in terms of what was the more meta dribbling technique. Then move into FIFA 23. What a nightmare dribbling that was for us in terms of trying to maneuver the ball. It just didn't move very quickly when you had it at your feet, did it? You know, you tried to maneuver with the left stick by rolling or chopping, and no real technique helped at all. FIFA 23 in a nutshell was just a year where you tried to avoid dribbling on a hole. Come EAFC 24 though, what I can say is it has been reincarnated. What I noticed about this year is dribbling is back. You can dribble in and out of tight spaces. It's quick, it's agile, it's also hard to tackle, especially if you know how to keep your back to the opponent. We'll get into that in a few segments time, but what I will say is it's a combination of both chopping and rolling the left stick depending on what movements you want to make on the ball. To maneuver the ball quickly back and forth, the chopping technique is good for this. But if you're looking to maneuver yourself through gaps, through tackles, that is where the rolling technique comes in. So it's a combination of both. You're both chopping and rolling depending on what situation you are in. And throughout this tutorial, we're going to actually specify what technique would work best with the particular technique that I'm teaching you when it comes to dribbling. First of all, we're going to get into taking a touch to determine the dribble, a segment that I did delve into last year in 23, and I'm going to make another segment in the complete EAFC 24 dribbling tutorial. The direction you take the touch is so important when it comes to dribbling because you need to take the ball first time into the space to set yourself up in an opportunity where you can dribble into the space and away from the defender. Quite often I see people comment on the channel saying, I am dribbling to the space, I'm taking it through the gaps, but I keep getting tackled. But little do they know that they're taking the ball first time towards the defender before they can even start to dribble properly. And that's the big mistake that I notice when it comes to dribbling in FIFA or aka EAFC. So look to the space, take a touch to the space, and that'll set you up for the dribble. Waiting for the defender to commit. So important. People don't wait long enough. They attempt to beat a defender and they fail to make the defender commit too far to a side before exploiting the space that is left open. They might do one feint or shimmy, but the defender hasn't quite been lost yet. And then they attempt to exploit the space that's open, but the defender has enough time to recover and get the tackle in. What you need to take notice of when it comes to dribbling and beating defenders, you need to make him commit. Okay, and this could take 1, 2, 3, even 4 shimmies, and to feint him away, to create enough space to exploit and delve off into. So when beating defenders, when dribbling in EAFC, make them commit too far to a side before exploiting the space. Always keep your back to the opponent. This is so important. If you do not keep your back to the opponent when it comes to dribbling, how on earth do you expect to keep the ball? All the time I see in my coaching academy, the most common mistake is people not dribbling with their back to the opponent. They think they can beat defenders by facing them head on and dribbling through them like they're Lionel Messi. Dribbling doesn't work like that in video games. You need to dribble to the space and keep your back to the opponent to actually have the ability of beating that defender. And a key basic of this is keeping your back to the opponent. Ball protection. This implements the shield button. Now people think, oh, I have the shield button at my disposal. I should be using it more often, and a lot of the time people do spam it. They spam it too much, and that's the mistake. You can't rely on shielding to do the dribbling for you. And people think they can use the shielding button to compensate for their inefficiencies when it comes to dribbling. You still need to dribble to the space, you still need to keep your back to the opponent, and you still need to chop and both roll as a combination when it comes to the maneuvers of the left stick. Only shield briefly when the opponent is on you and you're attempting to dribble back into the space whilst keeping your back to the opponent. If he seems to be on you and putting a lot of pressure on you, you can tap the shield button briefly to nudge the defender off the ball and protect it. But you shouldn't be spamming it. You should really be focusing on dribbling back into the space, because if you do this, you won't have to worry too much about shielding the opponent off the ball. Changing the pace. Now this does incorporate utilizing the sprint button when it comes to dribbling in and out of spaces and beating opponents. A change of pace can be very effective when dribbling, especially when there are spaces to exploit and opponents to try and burst past. Now, I do want to insert a disclaimer into this segment. Do not abuse or spam the sprint button. It's the most common mistake I see in my coaching academy when it comes to attacking in general. People sprint too much. When you sprint, the touch is way too large for you to control, and you're more susceptible to having the ball tackled off you. But when you're dribbling throughout the spaces in EAFC and you see a space, you can burst off into it before letting go of the sprint button again and then dribbling in and out of the space yet again. Again, it's a combination of chopping and maneuvering the left stick by rolling it to dribble in and throughout the space. And then when you see that space to exploit, you chop towards that direction and tap the sprint button. You can hold it for a split second, maybe 2 seconds at least, maximum, before then letting go of it and dribbling throughout the space yet again. Dribbling on the wing. Now this does incorporate the technique of keeping your back to the opponent and rolling as well as chopping the left stick. The rolling motion happens as you're dribbling around that wing area, and then the actual feinting motion when it comes to feinting that defender away is a chopping motion on the left stick. When you're dribbling towards the line, you want to dribble and weave in and out, rolling the stick, a similar technique to what I taught you just then. And then when the opponent is on you, you can then feint them 2 or 3 times before they commit too far to a side to then exploit the space. You want to feint them at least twice or 3 times to make them commit too far to a side before exploiting the space. Because as I said earlier on in the segment on feinting opponents, if you don't do it enough, you won't make him commit to a side enough to beat him on the wing. But it can be super effective when it comes to trying to find an inside pass from that width area into the 18-yard box. And that's what you'll find yourself in a lot of the time. A situation where you're on the wing and you're trying to find a central pass to try and get into a dangerous area. Utilizing this technique will allow you to do that. Beating opponents in the box with left stick dribbling. Again, we're incorporating the left stick dribbling technique of dribbling to the space. We're incorporating keeping our back to the opponent, and we're incorporating a chopping technique when it comes to the final feint away. Now, one important technique that I want to add on into this, and that you guys need to try and implement into your dribbling game when it comes to beating defenders in the box, is looking at the spaces in the box. If you don't specifically look at the space when it comes to dribbling in EAFC, you will dribble towards a defender in the box. And why it's so important is because there are more defenders in the box than there are in the midfield. So it can be more difficult for you to dribble in tighter spaces, especially if you're not looking at the space. Now I want to use an analogy. When it comes to dribbling in general in EAFC, think of skiing. When skiers are going down a hill, they are looking at the path. They are not looking at the tree. If they look at the tree, they'll naturally swerve to the tree, which will cause them to hit the tree. think of the defenders as trees and think of the space on the pitch as the path. Look at the path and your hand-eye coordination will be kind to you, and you'll be able to dodge and weave in and out of tackles inside the 18-yard box in EAFC. Beating defenders in the midfield. Now this can be a rather advanced technique, but again it incorporates everything I've taught you thus far. Dribbling to the space, keeping your back to the opponent, and always looking at the holes and gaps to maneuver the player in and out, and feinting that midfielder away as you beat him in the midfield. Now, in general, you shouldn't be focusing too much on dribbling in the midfield in general anyway, because it's about passing in that area of the pitch. You don't want to spend too long on the ball with your midfielders. If you do, you will get squeezed, especially against high caliber players. But what dribbling in the midfield is about is attempting to try and create space and create passing lanes. And that can be done by feinting opponents away or dribbling towards a defender, which would be the midfielder, and then dribbling back, which is a chopping motion. So you dribble towards you, then chop back, to then drag him out towards you, and that will leave a gap in space because the opponent is forced to follow you and try and get the tackle in. Doing this can allow you to either feint him away and create a passing lane into, let's say, an attacker, or find another pass to another midfielder to then create that space and exploit the space that you just opened up by dragging that midfielder out. This is very important, and it can be helpful for you trying to beat defenders in the midfield, but I'll say it again, being in the midfield when attacking is not about dribbling. It's about passing. Left it dribbling with defenders. Now, one very important basic rule that you want to keep in your head when it comes to having the ball with your defenders and dribbling with them. Dribbling with your back to the opponent. Because if you don't stick to that rule, this basic rule that I taught you at the start, you will lose the ball in vulnerable areas. When it comes to dribbling with defenders, a good technique is if you get stuck and you don't have any options, because you should be trying to pass out from the back quicker when it comes to building up in EAFC. You shouldn't be spending too long on the ball with either your defenders or your midfielders, like I said. But if you're in a situation where you need to dribble your defender, dribble back into the space in a rather straight direction. So you're dribbling back and you're weaving slightly in and out. And this weaving motion will actually cause the defender of your opponent to try and commit too far to either left or right to try and wrap himself around and get the tackle in. But you keeping your back to the opponent will allow you to obviously muscle or weave or nudge that defender off the ball, or in general just make him commit too far to a side. By this you can then turn and then exploit the space that's been left open, which should be a lot of space, or in general you just try and find another pass into a defender or midfielder which is showing for the ball, who should be open because you've just dragged that attacker out towards you. But the key thing when dribbling with defenders is always keeping your back to the opponent and dribbling straight back. Because if you try and do a feint motion with defenders, especially if they don't have good dribbling stats, and that won't be the case until the end of the year with team of the season or team of the year, you need to dribble back and not try and feint the attacker off the ball too radically with your defender. You will lose out in a vulnerable area. We don't want that. Rounding the keeper. Now, there are situations where you might be one-on-one and you're very tempted to round that keeper to create yourself one of those 100% goal scoring opportunities where the goal is open after beating that keeper. Now, it incorporates a chopping motion, okay? But the approach to the keeper is a slight roll as you approach him, because you're rolling the slit slightly straight as you approach and then you're quickly chopping. You need to time it. If you're too late, the keeper will sweep it up. If you're too early, the keeper won't dive down and he'll just sweep the ball back up from your feet. It's a matter of doing the chopping motion as the keeper begins to dive down. It's similar to when you're performing a ball roll around the keeper. You want to do it just as he starts to dive down. Not before and not after he dives down, but just as he starts, you want to chop that left stick to round him and create a 100% goal scoring opportunity. And who doesn't like those opportunities? I know I do. Dribbling back to open up space. This is a technique you're going to be using with your attackers more specifically, because when you hit your attacker's feet, there are going to be situations where the defender is then forced to follow the attacker that you've hit the feet of. Dribbling back into the space when it comes to dribbling with your attackers or your striker not only keeps your back to the opponent, not only allows you to keep possession, but it drags that defender out. And this is the best thing about it. You hit the feet of the attacker, don't go forward, go back, wait for your other attackers to run forward, and I want to outline the significance of dribbling back with your attacker. Number 1, keeps your back to the opponent. Number 2, you keep possession. Number 3, you open up gaps in space by dragging the defender out. Number 4, it gives you time and your other attackers time to then run forward and get into a position which is a better position to pass them and get into better positions. Because when you're attacking and you hit the striker's feet, the other attackers and midfielders are still trying to progress forward from your own defensive half. And what dribbling backwards does is it allows them to get forward in time whilst you're dribbling back. And you'll find by dragging that defender out of his position, the other attackers will actually run through those holes. With high formation nets too, AI will be smart enough to then run those attackers into those holes, which you can then turn and thread them through. So you can hold it up by doing this and hitting your attacker's feet, and if you keep your back to the opponent will not have a chance of winning the ball back off your attacker. Now I do want to talk about Straffe dribbling. In my opinion, they've been nerfed. They are not viable, they are not usable. I highly recommend sticking to regular left stick dribbling this year. Don't even bother with Straffe dribbling. They're very lethargic, very slow and non-reactive to the defender that's approaching, which means you can't turn away as quick. I've found left stick dribbling is just as effective, and if you can focus on that as a fundamental in EAFC 24, and you'll prevail with dribbling this year. You know how sprinting is an issue, because if you sprint, the touch that you take can be way too large, and essentially your player will be more susceptible to having the ball tackled off him. There is now a sprint dribbling technique which allows you to keep the ball in tight to you, aka R1 dribbling. And this can be performed, as I was saying, by holding in R1 as you're dribbling. And you can alternate between all 3 techniques. Use regular left stick dribbling, dribble throughout the space. If there's a lot of space to exploit, you may want to tap the R2 button to burst into that space and tap it into the hole that you're trying to exploit. But then you have R1 dribbling. If there are still defenders around you, and you would be more susceptible to having the ball tackled off you if you were to regular sprint, then R1 dribbling is the technique for you. And all you need to do is hold in that R1 button as you're dribbling. The player will start sprint dribbling, almost like Messi does when he's on the ball and he's starting to dribble at defenders to beat them one-on-one. You can do this, keep it in tight to you, exploit the gap, exploit the space that has been left open, whilst keeping tight control in. But I did want to add in a last final short but sweet segment on beating defenders one-on-one. A lot of you are fans of Lionel Messi, and a lot of you want to dribble like he does. And what does that entail? It entails dribbling one-on-one against defenders and beating them. Now, if you're wanting to do this, you maneuver the left stick back and forwards. This will do a shimmy motion, which will then hopefully make the defender commit too far to a side. And you can then exploit the space by using the sprint technique, because once you see that space and hole open up, you can then sprint briefly into that hole to then exploit that space and gap. Switching orbit dribbling to off will be the biggest game changer for you when it comes to dribbling that you have ever seen in any previous FIFA, and this year in EAF situation we have the setting to on. As you can see, I can't maneuver the ball as quick. He feels and looks sluggish. We turn orbit dribbling off and just look at the fluidity on the ball. It's an absolute game changer for tight, close ball control dribbling when you're trying to maneuver in and out of tackles and get into spaces. I believe all but dribbling itself allows you to protect the ball a bit more because you're stronger on it, but I just don't like it. Turn it off. It gives you more agility. You're able to maneuver away from defenders a lot quicker, and Bob's your uncle. But that'll sing at the end of it. Again, smash 1,000 likes, and we'll drop some more dribbling tutorials for you guys, some more in-depth dribbling tutorials. And I hope you enjoyed it as well. I'm coaching one-on-one on patreon.com. And of course, hit the subscribe button. This is where I'm uploading many tutorials throughout the year and my RTG series. We can check out some gameplay and learn some ins and outs of that. And learn the ins and outs of how I personally play in EAFC. Keep in touch with me through there. I am coaching one-on-one on patreon.com. If you want to be part of that, the link is down below. But I'm out. Sayonara. Au revoir. Adios. Salam. Ciao. Goodbye. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. And lastly, if you do want any pre-gaming fuel or supplement, then head over to atpscience.com, which is the first link in the description, and use the code DylanEtsATP at checkout to get yourself a discount. Not only is it the cheapest way to get supplements, but it helps me out a ton, guys, so thank you.